Jacob Zuma was addressing both houses of Parliament, National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Well, for the next half an hour, we'll be bringing you all the reaction, starting now with you, Prof. Overall, your sense?
Well, I think the President sought out to answer one question. Is South Africa a better place than it was in 1994? And he was able to take us through the last 20 years, giving us statistics, and also he sought to answer what he did in the last 5 years and the innovation that he had actually created. He talked about the NDP, which is also one of those things that we talked about as a new innovation within the ANC ruling party to say, let us plan beyond 5 years. The second thing that he raised was the issue of the monitoring and evaluation, which is very important, which also should help government to anticipate and to be able to measure its own progress, not to wait for 5 years or the whole year. Especially given that it always gets the damning report from the Auditor General. But when you have something like monitoring, you begin to deal with those issues. He talked about the issues that are very pertinent. At the moment, everybody talks about corruption. He indicated the steps that this government is going to be taking to deal with corruption, the whole notion of the anti-corruption hotline, the issue of prohibition of public servants from doing business with government, the issue of what the Special Investigating Unit is doing. So he was able to pick up that. But he also was able to look at the successes that we are beginning to record in education, also indicating that right now we also have facilities that enable even the adult learners to get in, that about 2.2 million have actually gone through that. And he was also bringing the numbers, looking at the infrastructure development, especially given the economy, that the government is investing in what you call economic infrastructure by dealing with issues of rail, dealing with the issues of the dams, etc., to say this is our contribution. But also to say, at the moment, we're also aware that we're dealing with issues of strikes and protests. He was quite firm on that. And what I like about it is that it is an era of responsibility, to say we must also be responsible in as much as we can allow protests to occur. The violent protests, especially those where violence is premeditated, there is a need for government to take a firm position on those.
Thank you very much, Prof. And we are going to get into some detail of some of the areas that the President went through and actually mentioned. For now, though, we're going to go to our reporters who are on either side of the stoop, the parliamentary stoop outside the National Assembly. I'm going to start with Lukhanyo Kalata, who is standing by with the leader of the official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, Madam Helen Zille. Lukhanyo, it's over to you.
Vuyo, thank you very much. As you rightly point out, I am here with Helen Zille, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. Ma'am, 6 million seems to be the magic number. The President saying 6 million work opportunities between now and 2019. The Democratic Alliance went on the march 2 days ago. 6 million real jobs. What's the difference?
The difference is vast. Real jobs come out of economic growth of 8%, which can be achieved with our policies. Work opportunities are temporary replacements. They're called EPWP jobs. And while those are very important to alleviate extreme poverty, they are no substitute for real jobs that happen because of economic growth. The President tonight said that about 500,000 jobs have been created. Well, he promised 5 million jobs. And so only 1 out of 10 of those jobs materialized. And that is why we need economic growth, to ensure that we get real jobs, and many of them.
All right. Ma'am, the other thing that the President mentioned was that the government was streamlining regulations to make making business in South Africa easier. Clearly, that must be something that the Democratic Alliance is at least satisfied with.
Well, we'd like to see what they are, because for a long time that has been said, but nothing has happened. And if anything, the regulations have gotten worse. So while we certainly welcome that in principle, we'd like to see what it means in practice.
All right. Ma'am, thank you very much for joining us.
May I just say a few more things?
Very briefly, please.
Very briefly. I think that on corruption, the President needs to put his money where his mouth is. He's got no credibility to talk about corruption when he refuses to go to court to answer his own charges. And furthermore, South Africa is a much better place to be in now than it was under apartheid. There's no doubt about that. But the progress has not been made under President Zuma, but under Presidents Mandela and Mbeki.
All right. Ma'am, thank you very much. That was Helen Zille, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. Let's now cross you over to the other side to my colleague, Bulelani Philip.
Thank you, Lucanio. We are outside in the parliamentary precinct. Still more reaction. You'll recall that in his speech, President Zuma declared that South Africa is much better off now compared to 1994. But the Freedom Front Plus argues that he focused too much on the past and said nothing about the future. Joining me now is the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Mr. Peter Mulder. Why do you say that he focused too little on the future?
I think as we predicted, it was a brag speech, maybe focusing on the election, and I would have liked to hear more about the crisis in the country. If it's such a good story, why are all the municipalities burning? And I think in that sense, it was much more of the same. If I try to be positive, surely I'm positive, and I agree with him when he talks about the mining situation. More responsibility from the unions, from the bosses. They're destroying our economy, and surely we'll support him in that. And also on corruption, the whole question of a central tender board, I think that's positive. But I would have liked to hear more about the future, how we're really going to address these problems and not only brag about the future. I think it's only for the election.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Peter Mulder, leader of the Freedom Front Plus. For more reaction, I will cross over to my colleague, Lucanio Calata, on the other side.
Bulelani, thank you very much. I'm now joined by Reverend Kenneth Mishra, the leader of the ACDP. Reverend, thank you very much for joining us. It was a speech that was more reflective than forward-looking. Would you agree?
I definitely agree. It was a very cleverly written speech, in the sense that he started by talking about the people who suffered in the struggle, people who died, to get the sympathy of the public that is very unhappy with him now. As you look at the violent service protests, that's an indication that the public in the country is not happy with what is happening. Now, he also mentioned a lot of good things that government has done, but that does not correspond with what's happening on the ground, because many people are angry, many people are saying they are not going to vote. If people were happy and were in agreement with what the president said, people were going to look forward to voting, but a lot of people we are trying to convince to go and vote for an alternative party because they are not happy with the performance of government.
All right, sir, thank you very much. Reverend Kenneth Mishra, they're talking about how the elections are likely to be litmus test for the ANC come the election time later this year. Let me now cross you back to my colleague Bulelani Philip, who's standing by.
Thank you so much, Lucanio. More reactions on the parliamentary precinct. Joining me now is the leader of the UDM, Mr. Bantu Olomisa, to talk to us more about what he thought about the president's State of the Nation address. Mr. Olomisa, you came here hoping that the president can pronounce more on job creation and as well as basic service delivery. What's your thoughts on what is done?
Well, there's nothing new which he had said. What we have noticed is that he has been rehashing all the annual reports which we have read so far. And he has no plan to create jobs, really, because he is talking now about creating jobs up until 2019, 6 million jobs. It's the old story. We've heard that noise before. But what we need to look at in this State of the Nation is that he has painted a rosy picture inside here, contrary to what we are seeing outside, where the country is on fire in every corner of this country. So one needs to make sure that this statement where he is misleading the public needs to be attended to as soon as possible.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Bantu Olomisa, leader of the UDM. And for more reaction, we cross back to Lucanio Calata on the other side.
Bulelani, thank you very much. I am standing here with Mr. Gwede Mantashe, Secretary General of the African National Congress. Sir, the President touched on a lot of things today, primarily the economy, growing the economy and creating 6 million new jobs between 2014 and 2019. As the ANC, how is that going to be achieved?
Now, the first thing that is important about this State of the Nation address is that it was an account to the nation for the work done over the last 5 years. And the President went through all the 5 priority areas that we set ourselves at the beginning of the term. And the report was quite coherent. He did deal with the question of employment and the economy, touching on various aspects on how the objective set will be achieved. Emphasize the cooperation between government, private sector, labor, and all other social partners to ensure that we achieve what we set ourselves to do. And the 6 million job opportunity He emphasized that it is the jobs that are building on 3.5 million jobs which were provided by public works and community development work over the past 5 years, which give young people access to work and actually give them opportunity to be trained. And that is going to be step out to achieve a target of 6 million that is said. That is what we are talking about.
So then there was the other issue of fracking. Basically, the president announcing that will be starting soon in the Karoo, that legislation will be prepared to pave the way for that. As the ANC, obviously you see this as a game changer, the president called it.
It's a game changer in the sense that access to gas and oil for South Africa would be a game change. It is among the 4 catalytic sectors that we have targeted: energy, transport infrastructure, ICT, and water infrastructure. And therefore fracking is but one aspect. But we also talk about access to a mix of the energy, whether it is nuclear, he touched on that, and he also touched on green energy. So that combination is going to be a game changer in the sense that it will have multiplier effects on other sectors. He spent a lot of time talking about mining and what contribution can make. And for mining to be efficient, these game changers should be efficient and supply the necessary resources.
Right. Sir, thank you very much. We really do appreciate your time. If I may just jump in here and get Prince Buthelezi. Sir, good evening. And the president spoke about the issue of jobs. 6 million jobs that he created. I know that the IFP has in recent years been quite pressing on the president on the issue of creating jobs.
Absolutely. I think that it's actually a big delusion to tell us about the expanded program of the public works, which creates only temporary jobs, because we need sustained jobs. And also the fact that he admits himself that, to create jobs, economic growth should go up to 5%. And it's nowhere near that. In fact, when I was in government, that was our aim too. This was a commission for the election, as far as I'm concerned, because although he mentioned some important things like, for instance, the violence that characterizes the protests, but it must not be forgotten that was taught by the ANC, to making the country ungovernable, and so on, and making townships ungovernable, and who taught African people to make petrol bombs? It was the ANC. They should be celebrating,
All right. If I can just quickly jump in here. The president did also look back on the last 5 years of his presidency to a very large degree. Are you satisfied with the last 5 years of the Zuma presidency?
No, honestly, I am, because he has been, there was a minister here who was called Mr. Promise, but he has been Mr. Promise himself, because there are many things that he has promised. Speaking from that podium, he said he was going to create 500,000 jobs. In fact, 1 million jobs were lost, So he likes to make promises. And I even said to him in this very parliament that our people are patient. That Smart said that we're as patient as an S in 1947, and that if our people know how bad things are, they'll actually soldier it. They'll soldier as we did during the apartheid era. And it's no use insulting the intelligence of our people by promising something that he cannot deliver.
All right. So thank you very much for joining us. That was Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who is the leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party. Let me now cross you over to my colleague Bulelani Philip, who's standing by.
Thank you, Lucanyo. More reactions on the precinct. Now, President Jacob Zuma also spoke about one of the priorities of the ruling party, that's education. Amongst the issues that is raised is that there will be 2 new universities, as well as 12 FET colleges, as well as the opening of teacher training colleges. But the United Christian Democratic Party says that's not enough. Joining me now is the leader of the party, Mr. Sipho Mfundisi. You say you're concerned about his pronouncements on education. Can you elaborate what you mean by that?
Certainly so, mainly because the very little was said about the infrastructure in the primary schools. Like we have just had instances where children fell in toilets, and not much was said by the president on that. And number 2 is the question of explaining to the nation that the results were good, yes, but it was mainly to make provision for the new caps program that is coming in, so that there shouldn't be a blockage. When you look at it, the quality of the results, you realize that much could still be done in terms of improving that. The other thing also pertains to the college, the further education colleges, further education training colleges. The products of those institutions come out and they get the certificates, but there are no jobs for them. So really much still has to be done. We welcome, of course, the new universities, and we look forward to them also alleviating the problem, congestion in the other universities, while in the same breath also making, the government has to make sure that as these children pass, they must find accommodation. We have a situation where immediate plans have had to be made at tertiary institutions where there was no room for them. Sometimes even ordinary funds, they passed, but there are no bursaries for them. We hope in future government will do much better on that one.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sipho Mfundisi, UCDP leader here in Parliament. For more reaction on my right, we're going to bring Monitoring and Evaluations Minister, Mr. Collins Shabane. Mr. Shabane, the President spoke about a central tender system. You're probably going to be one of the people who will be monitoring the work of that particular structure. Can you give us a sense, going forward, how this structure will operate?
Obviously, faced with the challenges which we have of the procurement and the alleged corruptions which is taking place in the various levels of government, a decision to centralize the tender system is to try to stem up that process. It's something which we are still working on, and hopefully in the course of the new administration will then put in place mechanisms to make sure that happens.
And some of the targets that have been set here by the President, are you going to be playing a proactive part to ensure that they are met?
Obviously, we are going through elections. I might not be there in the next government, so I don't want to assume. There will be a new administration after elections. Whether I will be a minister then or I won't be a minister, it doesn't matter. But those who will be there will have to follow those targets, incorporate the targets from the manifesto of the party which is going to win the elections to make sure that the work of the NDP goes forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins Shabane, Minister in the President's in charge for monitoring and evaluation. For more reaction on the other side of the precinct, it's back to Lucanyo Talata.
Mr. Roy Bula from the Minority Front. Sir, you serve on the Human Settlements Committee. The President spoke quite a lot about human settlements and housing. Are you satisfied?
Absolutely. Firstly, let me say, Madiba is not here with us today, but he's here spiritually, morally, and ethically. And President Zuma is a product of Madiba. We welcome President Zuma's commitment. We welcome President Zuma's plan in delivering homes. We welcome President Zuma's plans in dealing with the issue of poverty. Throughout the country, we have many small groups, minority communities that have their problems, religious factors, tender issues, BEE. And we're glad that President Zuma has ignited Madiba's legacy together with creating this rainbow nation strong and vibrant. But what is important for the MF? We call for a social cohesion. There must be a social cohesion. We must, and it's absolutely imperative to build a strong South African nation based on patriotism. And indeed, President Zuma has all his hands on the pulse to push the right buttons to deliver all our people from the shackles of poverty into the light of democracy and development.
All right, that's it from Mr. Roy Bula, who's saying that they obviously support a lot of the things that President Jacob Zuma was speaking about in his speech. Let me now cross you over to my colleague Bulelani Philip, who is standing by. Bulelani.
Thank you, Lucanyo. More reactions on the parliamentary precinct. Joining me now is the leader of AZAPO here in Parliament, Mr. Jake Dikobo. Basically, the President talked a lot about land reform as well as rural development. Your take on that?
Well, the President was marking his own script and he was generous with the marks. Look, the issue of land reform, firstly, let us as AZAPO welcome the reopening of the enlargement of the claims, because many people who were entitled to claim their land back were locked out. So we welcome that. But let's also agree that the process that has been used has been very flawed. We have always spoken against this so-called willing buyer, willing seller, that it was not working. as they reopen the lodgement opportunity, we also need to look at other ways, including expropriation, where things don't go our way. Because I don't think our people can wait for another 20 years. Our people have been landless for too long, and the sooner the issue of land is addressed, the better.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jake Dikobo, leader of AZAPU here in Parliament. And from us here on the Parliamentary Precinct, Lukanyo Kalata and Bulelani Philip, it's a very good bye, and it's back to Vuyo in the studio.
Well, special thanks to our team, Bulelani Philip and Lukanyo Kalata, for bringing us those political reactions from political parties across the ideological divide. Well, let's wrap, Prof, and maybe go back to say, is the fact that not much was new necessarily a bad thing?
Well, I don't think it's a bad thing. It's important to ask the question, what was he trying to answer? And he was very clear that I'm trying to answer the question that says South Africa is not better. And I think there's a concession even from the DA that South Africa is a better place today than it was. But the other political parties are also correct to say that sense of better is not felt on the ground. The fact that you have a nationwide protest on a daily basis seems that suggests that something between what the ruling party says it has achieved and how it's experienced, there's a gap, and they need to address that. But we cannot query around certain things, like there is now about 85% electricity that is provided to South Africans, that there's a provision of water, that there's schools that are being built on almost every week, that there are new universities. So these are positive things. But at the same time, we should actually be saying, our people are saying, yes, the quality of those things is what we are worried about. There's an issue of corruption, and I think the ruling party has acknowledged that. But maybe the acknowledgement has come too late. And it's very important that the South Africans participate in this uprooting of corruption. So on the whole, you could say the president was very, as Reverend Mekwe says, it is a very cleverly written speech, especially when you appeal to the sympathy of the people. So I agree with him on that point.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying even though, as virtually every political leader there said or pointed out, even though people are demonstrating, showing their unhappiness about a whole range of things, it doesn't necessarily follow that South Africa is worse. Now that the South Africa of today is worse than what we inherited, what the government inherited back in 1994.
No, definitely. I think what we need to do is that we should not be dishonest about the conditions. And some of us have been people who were in apartheid. We know what it was like. We know the facilities, the privileges that we enjoy today. But at the same time, I think the concerns that emerges from those who are protesting and those who are disagreeing, they are simply making one statement to say you could have done better with the 20 years that was given to you.
And South Africans do expect the people they voted for to actually do better. On the last point, Prof. Buthelezi puts it like this. He says, when all has been said and done, this was a commercial for elections. Do you agree? Disagree?
Of course. I mean, if you're a ruling party, why would you want to sell yourself short? So this is the privilege that you enjoy for being an incumbent. You exploit the platform that is given to you. But we also expect you to also be a bit truthful. If you're going to simply present a rosy picture, and in the ANC tradition, they always say more could have been done, and there's more work needs to be done, as a way of covering up for the weaknesses that have become apparent.
Which, truth be said, is effectively what the speech did.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Professor Sipho Siepe, who was my guest throughout this broadcast. And that is how we come to the end of this evening's broadcast. The 2014 State of the Nation address delivered this evening once more by President Jacob Zuma, and this being the last for this particular term. As to what happens in the next 3-4 months leading up to that 7th of May, we will be watching, and we will certainly, as SABC News, be bringing you every aspect of that election campaign and everything that's going to happen over the next few months live on all our channels. Thank you very much for watching. From me, Vuyo Mvoko, and the rest of the crew, it's a goodbye for now.